Robosaurus Rex asks, how long do homeowners usually wait around before they are willing to negotiate price drops? Well, Robosaurus, that is a great question that I'm going to dedicate this week's entire video to. But before I do, I have a quick question for you to ask yourself. And that is, have you subscribed to the channel yet? If not, please go ahead and do so right now because I appreciate absolutely everybody that is watching. And when you subscribe, it helps me grow the channel. So thank you for that. And in return for joining this community, my hopes are that you can not only learn more about growing your personal wealth through real estate, but that if you need help in the market or if you are living in or looking to move to the lower mainland of BC, please don't hesitate to reach out and book a call with me using the link in the description below this video, so we can discover if my team holds the right solutions for your personal situation. And with that out of the way, let's ask Robosaurus Rex's question again. How long do homeowners usually wait around before they are willing to negotiate price drops? Well, the very short answer to that question is, in my market, over the last year, the average homeowner negotiated their price downwards after 28 days by as much as about 2%. But unfortunately, that answer is extremely oversimplified and not telling the whole story, because the relationship between the seller and their agent and the buyer and their agent, and then, well, everybody in between, well, it can be a lot like a social media relationship. It's complicated. First, you have to know that every single asking price has nothing to do with market value. The asking price is simply the price used to market the property. In a perfect world, the seller picks that price after being educated by their agent in accordance with both recent listings and sales, as well as market trends depending on if the market is going up or down, as well as how much other active competition is on the market at the same time. But in reality, the seller is the one that gets to dictate the price. So if they think for whatever reason that their property is worth more than, say, the last sale, they may pick a higher, and often do pick a higher price, and be less willing to negotiate. Even more often, sellers pick such a high price that buyers won't even bother coming to take a look at the listing, and it will likely just sit on the market with no real chance of selling. And that can actually just make it even harder for new sellers coming to the market, but maybe not for the reasons that you think. You see, the seller's eternal trap that they always fall into is that they think that they should sell for as much or probably more than their neighbor is getting down the street. But if that guy down the street is asking, say, $100,000 over market value, buyers aren't even looking at that property at all. And now seller number two is very tempted to come to the market around that same price. And then quickly the market fills up with several unsaleable properties. Even worse, as an agent, many of my potential sellers will say to me,
well, just bring me an offer, but I'm not going to drop my list price. I want to see what buyers are willing to pay.
Well, in this case, in the majority of markets, specifically metropolitan areas, the buyers won't even book a showing because there are so many properties available that are already within their price range that they are willing or able to spend. And even more buyers don't want to either insult the seller with what they would consider to be a realistic price, or they're not in for a confrontation. Most buyers will have little appetite to lowball. It's true. Canadians tend to be nice. But also, over recent years, there have been more buyers in the market than sellers. So sellers were spoiled and often received offers over their asking price, even if that asking price was on the high side in the first place. When the market was hot, another marketing trick was to underlist a property on purpose, knowing that the seller's expectation of actual selling price are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more. And now that the market has returned to somewhat of a normalized condition, many agents still want to look like a hero and coach their clients to underlist, even though that strategy may not work given current market conditions. So all of these situations unfortunately lead to the real answer to the question, and that is every listing must be looked at on an individual basis when it comes to negotiating a fair market value. Boring, right? For example, if a home was listed at $600,000, but it's worth $700,000, would you buy it for $650? Because that would be $50,000 over the asking price. And maybe you don't want to pay over asking. But it could also be $50,000 under market. Or let's say the seller of that exact same property was asking $800,000, but they're willing to let it go for $750,000. Some buyers would look at that as just having saved $50,000, while an educated buyer would understand that they just paid about $50,000 too much. But let's assume that that listing agent has done a good job of educating their sellers on price, and that seller accepts to list their property at market value, which is the one that was recommended, and that property is priced reasonably. And now let's assume that the buyer's agent has also educated their client about pricing, and the buyer is realistic. Now, while we run into a spot where we might not all have exactly the same numbers, but they're relatively close. And obviously in that transaction, the buyer and seller would each rather have the price negotiated slightly in their favor. And this is where I like to see where the market is negotiating price and how long it's taking to do so. Lucky for me, I work in the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board area, and the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board staff have put out this information. You see, in the entirety of last year, 2023, the average property ended up selling for 98% of the asking price. So one would believe that if you are buying an average property, you should be able to negotiate about 2% off as a rule of thumb compared to the rest of the market. But then there's another stat that is just as important, and that is what we call DOM, or days on market. You see, if the average time to sell a property was 28 days on market, and it was, then you should probably combine these two numbers and think to yourself, if the property you're looking at is 28 days on market, then it should probably most likely sell for 98% of the list price. But then again, you have to consider that this is just averages and not specific to the property you're looking at. So you have to imagine that all of the properties that hit the market this week, if they are priced correctly and if they start getting offers right away, well, the best properties always sell quicker and for a higher price. So it's more common that the new listings will go into multiple offer situations and sell over the asking price. But what if, say, a property is on the market now for 65 days? Well, then personally, I would consider that the same 2% of the asking price is probably too high. And these properties that have been on the market for seemingly what feels like forever, in theory, should come down in price even more if they are to actually achieve a sale, making them ripe for the picking for anyone who wants to go into some really hardball negotiations. However, these are not the only factors. If the market is going up, say 5% per month, and the property was, say, 10% overpriced, in 60 days, that property might now actually sell for what the seller thinks is a great deal at the asking price. And this is actually one way that agents can tell if the market is heating up or not. Because if all of the stale listings start to sell, that means prices are starting to catch up with sellers' expectations. But you can't just look at days on market or the seller's original asking price as your market metrics. That's because if the seller adjusts their price downwards, this essentially breathes new life into the listing and possibly, essentially, resets those days on market, even though essentially the listing doesn't say so. This is actually how I bought my personal residence, because the listing was on the market for something like $765,000 for more than 60 days. We love the house, but hey, we couldn't afford it. And when I did my numbers, I figured that this home was worth about $689,000 to $699,000 at that time, like more than 10 years ago. Well, the day we sold our townhouse, our new house reduced their price to $725,000, a new number that to me was much more reasonable. Then we negotiated that price down, and I still think I paid too much, settling with the sellers at $701,000 even. So keep an eye on those price changes as well. And on the other side of things, if you're a seller and now you know that the average home across the whole marketplace for all of last year sold in 28 days, if you have no offers on your property within that time frame, it's likely time for you to call your agent and get that price reduced if you really want to sell. But in reality, Robosaurus Rex, I guess what I'm trying to say is every individual property should be considered on its own merit, taking into account where you think the value is and in consultation with your agent. All while hopefully the listing agent both educates their seller correctly and encourages them to use a selling strategy that is appropriate for the market conditions. And if all of this still seems like a whole lot and you don't still quite know what to do, well, you can always book a call with me using the link in the description below at a time that works best for you. Make sure to subscribe, click the like button, and we'll see you in a couple of days.